So first and foremost, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here and have a chance to interact with everybody here today. You notice I don't have a nice accent. I have a New York accent. I'm from New York, so apologies if you have any trouble understanding me. Just ask me to repeat, and I'll try to do it. Clearly. I have to tell you, it's amazing to me as I think about the industry that what's going on now, both in terms of proliferation of content, proliferation of methodologies for consuming that content, and the evolution that we're seeing in the technology that actually enables all of that. I have not seen that kind of change really in 30 years, and which is incredible. And I know what you're thinking. 30 years. You've been in the industry for 30 years? Yeah, it's true. I started when I was 9, and have been loving it ever since. So, yeah, no, it's been a tremendous change from my perspective. Look, there are a lot of different ways to look at this industry. What the conversation that I'm about to have with you right now is based on what we at Telestream are seeing in the marketplace from the customers that we're interfacing with on a daily basis. The thing that's going to be important is I'm going to obviously talk about this from the standpoint of content creators, content aggregators, and content delivery companies. So the audience that I'm sort of speaking to is that implications of that are what is required in terms of serving those customers effectively in the marketplace, and how we see it playing out, and just a small little bit on how we're actually addressing that. So in the conversation I'm going to have with you is really identifying the paths to value, embracing software as a service, and really looking at that from the standpoint of our customers. I'm going to cover kind of 4 points when we get into this. Point number 1, and it was alluded to in the material that we heard earlier, was competition for and the expectations of the end consumer. Everything starts with the end consumer, because it is from the end consumer that all money flows. And in a profit and loss kind of environment, you got to kind of start with customers. Second component of that is, given consumer behavior and consumer situation, how do content players, how do media companies, media delivery companies, how do they react to those changes in the marketplace? We'll talk about that. Third, what is the promise of software as a service and cloud? What has worked well, and frankly, what's actually been the challenge associated with more acceleration? We've been hearing about cloud and software as a service for a long time. We've seen some progress, but it's amazing that, in fact, relative to the size of the industry, it's not as pervasive, frankly, as I think people expected it to be even 2 years ago. So I want to talk a little bit about that. What must software as a service providers do in order to address the opportunity to accelerate the market? How do we help the media industry accelerate the transformations that they need to execute to serve the markets as effectively as they possibly can? And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we as Telestream actually have responded. Again, not as an advertisement, but frankly, to give you a sense of at least how we're thinking about the industry. Let me ask a question, because I always like to start with a question. There's been a lot of work that's been done, a lot of market research that's been done about consumer behavior. By 2022, a number of studies have said, how many people believe that an end consumer will consume an additional 2 hours of video by 2022? How many think it's 2 hours? Raise your hands. Come on. How many think it's an hour? An hour of additional content. Got a couple over there. Okay, we got an hour there. How many think it's 10 minutes? Couple. All right. How many think it's a minute? Got one over there. You cheater. The answer is, based on several studies that have been done, including Activate in 2019, Activate, the consulting firm, we as human beings actually have figured out to almost replicate ourselves. We can consume 31 hours in a day in 24 hours. Pretty good, 31 hours in 24. That's amazing. Based on projections, a variety of approaches, the average consumer will consume only 1 additional minute of video by 2022. As a matter of fact, there are some studies that predict that actual video consumption will decline. We are actually being overloaded with video. That's kind of scary. Gazillions of channels are out there. More and more OTT choices for consumers. When I was growing up actually in the Boston area in the United States, I had 4 VHF stations, and I had 2 UHF stations. I had a whopping 4-station choice. Now I think about my children, and I think about all the different ways that they are consuming. They actually have reduced significantly their consumption of linear broadcast. What they actually do is, when they do watch linear broadcast, frankly, it's very, very targeted, specific channels that are unique to their interests. And we're seeing that a lot. We're also expecting video on any device, set-top boxes, smart televisions, tablets, mobile phones, kiosks, you name it. There are multiple choices, and so not only are consumers not going to consume that much more, they are consuming it over a variety of devices. And their expectations, and a lot of feedback we get from our customers are, their expectations are that the experience that they have had in watching linear broadcast will be replicated in the OTT environment. They expect the quality to be exactly the same. They do not give anybody any quarter with respect to quality expectations. So very, very significant issue. So bottom line, consumers are inundated with video. They consume it in multiple ways, and they are fundamentally discerning individuals. Competing for your consumer, for an individual content company, producer, distributor, delivery entity, has never been more challenging. You've got to compete for the attention of those consumers. So, providers have to break through the noise, right? This is the issue. So now I'm in an environment in which, as content providers, distributors, and delivery vehicles play, they've got to be able to respond. And in their minds, it's this is the fundamental question that we're all solving, and why SaaS is so important, is how do I maximize the return on every content minute? That's the fundamental question, right? How do we do that? And so, fundamentally, being Telestream, I'd love to tell you that everything starts with the things I'm about to talk about. But in reality, let's face it, content quality is incredibly important. And what we see with is a massive fragmentation of consumers. So our customers have to create content and leverage content that not only has broad mass appeal, but also does a lot of small specialized content to make the content unique to individual market segments. It's maximizing the return, right? So that's why when we were just having the conversation earlier about all the content that's being produced, and we talked about non-scripted content, It's because there needs to be a tremendous amount of investment associated with producing content that can then be consumed by these market segments. And the narrower those market segments, the more valuable those eyeballs are to specific sets of advertisers, et cetera. So that's why content companies are producing so much more content. But they cannot negate the need for their ability to have to deliver a quality experience. So it's not just I'm producing the best quality content that appeals to, bass fishermen, east of the Mississippi. But in reality, they've got to make sure that content is fundamentally delivered in a way that doesn't turn the consumer off. What is the cost of a consumer that actually decides that the buffering is too much or the content quality is inconsistent, or the video quality is inconsistent? So quality is table stakes for our customers in order to deliver competitively. With all of this that's kind of going on, our content companies, our customers are also significantly focused on agile innovation. So I've got to try and fail, and I need the ability, both operationally and from a cost structure perspective, to try quickly and to fail quickly. So I've got to be dynamic. I have got to figure out how to spin up my capabilities when I need them, give it a shot, tie my cash inflows to cash outflows everywhere, and if it's successful, I run with it, and if it's not, I've got to regroup. I've also got an enormous amount of content that I'm acquiring that can be repurposed and that can be remonetized. I need the ability to dynamically remonetize and repurpose content that I have produced. Build it once, use it in many different contexts. That requires agility, that requires innovation, that requires the need to fast fail. So what that all means ultimately is we've got a fragmented market. We maxed out. Revenue actually is flat for a lot of our content providers. And while we're seeing an inflow, particularly in the OTT space, of growth in advertising revenue, and we're seeing that come from things like direct marketing, in reality, it's competition for every single subscriber dollar and every single advertising dollar. So that means I've got to be able to do all this that I just talked about. The best content, failing fast, making sure I deliver quality, and I've got to do it, doing all of this with reduced operating cost, and staying agile to address those markets. And here's just a quote. Anything that could allow you to deliver more content cost effectively to a small audience is interesting. Delivering the best within a budget envelope, that's about maximizing the economic return. Everybody with me so far? Let's have some fun. So cloud was actually, so the promise of cloud was supposed to help with all of this, right? If you really think about it, cloud provides infrastructure that can be leveraged dynamically. As a content producer or distribution entity, I am only paying for what I use. I am not spending stranded capital. I am able to leverage somebody's infrastructure where I need it, when I need it, for as much as I need it, and I can tie my cash inflows, the subscription revenue that I get, the advertising revenue that I get, the sponsorship revenue that I get, I can tie that to my cash outflows, so that I'm not spending $100 million in building out infrastructure and then waiting for the infrastructure to fill up, right? Which is ultimately a bad return on invested capital. That's the whole promise of cloud. So that was the promise. But look, and I can be agile with cloud, right? Cloud will allow me to spin up what I need to when I need to theoretically and operate the business. Despite the fact that we've seen a tremendous amount of cloud, and we're seeing it in our company, and I'm sure many of you are seeing it as well, cloud adoption has actually been really slow. And why is that? Why has that adoption ultimately been slow? So first of all, I think the things that we are seeing in my space around media processing has been anything that is relatively simple, transcoding types of applications, we're seeing those get utilized. New projects, new small projects that are largely relatively simple workflows, we're seeing develop. Right? Those things are working very well. But actually, really complex multi-step, multi-location workflow processing, which is frankly the core of a lot of media processing, we're not seeing that happen that quickly. And in fact, that's what's scaring the heck out of a lot of our customers is, oh my God, I have invested all of this money, I've designed my business operations, I've purchased infrastructure, and I have built flawless workflows, hundreds and hundreds of them, built flawless workflows to ensure that my content gets produced and delivered the way it needs to, when it needs to, et cetera. And if I go to cloud, first of all, how the heck do I get from what I'm doing today to a cloud environment? How do I actually get that done? And by the way, if I do it, I've got a massive amount of risk. If I mess up, right? Content is king and my viewership is king. If I mess up, that is a huge problem. So there is fear for our customers of risk. There is stranded cost associated with our customers' environments. The point that was made earlier about the fact that this isn't going to be 100% migration to cloud anytime soon is absolutely right. Our customers are telling us, I've got content in all different locations. I've got workflows that I'm leveraging, that I'm using, and I want to be very careful. Existing workflows and risks of messing those up. Feedback we get from our customers constantly. There's fear about the content in the cloud. Once the content goes into the cloud, it's those of you who are 70s, grew up in the 70s will hopefully resonate with my Hotel California analogy. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Once you're in, you're in. And there's risk, right? Why? Two things. One is there's cost associated with egress charges in cloud. And so if my content is not already in the cloud and I put it in the cloud, there it shall stay unless I can justify the economics of the egress. Right? In addition to that, there's always going to be security concerns about that. That's going, we've heard customers who say, look, anybody can talk about cloud all they want and public cloud all they want. The realities are we're seeing in our environment, I don't want to have my content, which are my crown jewels, controlled and managed by somebody else that I don't see. So security becomes an issue in all of this. So, what does this all mean? Ultimately, the point that was raised earlier, we're seeing 100%. That is that the concept of movement of 100% to cloud is not something that we see happening anytime soon. But what it doesn't mean is that customers are not actually want to have migration paths towards the cloud. They absolutely fundamentally will. But the point is, back to the second point, is our customers are not sure exactly what steps it is that they should take. How do they start? What are the milestones that they need to reach? What are the different steps of that migration process? And part of what the software and the SaaS industry has to do is address those concerns. We can help our customers do what they need to. Tie cash inflow with cash outflow. Maximize economic return, but we've got to be able to help our customers through those challenges. So, what do we believe? What do we believe cloud should do for you? So, in reality, as I talked about, it isn't one size fits all. Providers have to provide for a clear migration and optimization strategy for content providers. Content providers need help, I think, in figuring out how to get from point A to point X, and they need to understand what point X actually is. The complexity of all of this, if hybridity is the case, if workflows are complex, they also need orchestration. And a point was made earlier, which I also resonated with. The concept of relying on one public cloud provider is a massive risk. People do not want to be locked into a single cloud provider. They want multi-cloud options. And frankly speaking, they want the ability to leverage not only public cloud options. A lot of our customers are interested in understanding and leveraging private cloud infrastructures and integrate those private cloud structures with their operation. So that orchestration piece, it's what I was terming with somebody earlier, three-dimensional orchestration. I need to be able to orchestrate across the value chain for a workflow, and I need to orchestrate environments in which that processing takes place, where that processing and storage takes place. And ideally, and this is where automation and ultimately AI and machine learning play in, is I need to be able to make those decisions based on what is optimal for what I'm trying to accomplish for that workflow. Okay? So, what do we believe we have to do? First and foremost is providing low-risk migration path to cloud-optimized business process, which means if a customer says, look, my new projects, got it, I can do elements of my new projects, but the core of my business and the core of my operations is everything that I've been doing for the last gazillion years. How do I migrate that? So providing that migration strategy is important, and it's about optimizing the return on every workflow and every business process. Aligning video minute cash inflows with cash outflows. The fundamental issue here is, can you actually help your customers understand exactly what the economic benefits and value would be, and how do you tie cash inflow with cash outflow and demonstrate it directly? So, for example, one of the concerns about using software as a service is if I am paying per a unit of processing, maybe it's a minute video produced. I need to understand what the cost of that ultimately is before I pull the trigger and decide to use a SaaS process. So an organization's SaaS provider's ability to, ahead of any execution, show the customer what the cost and the economic implications are for using cloud in that particular, or SaaS in that particular environment, is incredibly important. I've already talked about orchestration. A critical issue. There are a lot of companies out there right now that are looking for and trying to find mechanisms to orchestrate all the different dimensions of the workflows that today have been relatively monolithic. And then finally, if we're talking about an OTT environment and direct to consumer, and we buy into the trends that we saw in the first portion of today's conversation, then you recognize I've got to be able to do all of this over an infrastructure and an environment in which I don't have control of what's going on. So how do I measure, monitor, and hold my delivery partners accountable? That's where the quality portion comes in. In order to do what we're doing in driving the content and the manners that we've talked about, I have got to have constant understanding of what's going on from a quality perspective, so I can provide feedback and direction and frankly input to my delivery partners to make sure that in my direct-to-consumer experience is as flawless as what it looks like when someone is watching a linear broadcast television station. So this is actually a quote from some research that we've done internally. Being able to orchestrate channels quickly, simply, and efficiently is the reason to move to the cloud. Doing these things any other way involves an enormous amount of process, project management, and commercial effort. So that's the other aspect of this, is in order to define that migration strategy, in order to do all these things, you have to help your customer reduce what we call the OpEx bubble, which is how do you do all of this and not necessarily outstrip your customer's ability to actually pay for the transition. So this for us, from a Telestream perspective, are the watchwords that we use from an R&D perspective, from an investment perspective, and what we're doing to help our customers be successful. So, say we're doing on time. I think we're running tight, but we'll let me. So, how are we addressing this specifically? So everything that I told you is core to our SaaS and cloud strategy. We're addressing all 4 of those dimensions. I'm going to talk a little bit, just briefly, about them. First and foremost is we have a Telestream Cloud SaaS environment today. We sell straightforward transcoding capabilities. In addition, we're able to provide SaaS-based file quality control, and we're able to do time text speech translation. And we're able to do that on a per video minute consumed. And that addresses the opportunity for the customers who are doing small projects, who are doing relatively simple workflows, who want to have these capabilities. So we're there, we're addressing that. Where it's gotten interesting and what we've done, because we've recognized this migration challenge so significantly, was we said, look, we look at our customer base. They are all using our workflow design capability, and we have obviously a strong presence in the marketplace. And there is fear and concern about breaking those workflows. So what we've done is we've introduced something called CloudPort, which actually allows our customers to do some really interesting things. It allows them to actually run operations on-prem or in the cloud at their choosing. So someone who is a Vantage customer, they can actually now make a decision about which workflows they want to leverage in the cloud, which components of the workflows they want to leverage in the cloud. And talking about the automation discussion, what was also part of this is we're able to leverage metadata and conditional circumstances for the systems to be able to make dynamic decisions about whether or not it goes, where it actually goes. We can also do that using our back-end capability to access multiple clouds. So again, talking about creating that flexibility for your customer to make choices about which cloud environment they want to use, what to do in the cloud, when to do it in the cloud, and leverage their existing business processes, their existing operations, their existing infrastructure as the platform for doing that. So that's how we've addressed that portion. And then the other example that I'm highlighting is what we're calling Optic, which is a channel as a service, the ability to, in minutes, spin up an encoder, a package, an origin server, and all of the monitoring associated with it, because customers want to be able to spin up things quickly, execute the operation for as long as they need it. So this is a great application for sports and for musical events, and it's a great way, frankly, that our customers are finding that this is a chance for them to monetize content in ways that they weren't able to, because in the past it would take them a long time, weeks to set up the infrastructure, weeks to get the operations set up, and now it can be done. It can actually be done in minutes, spun up, leveraged, utilized, tying the cash inflows with the cash outflows. So let me summarize kind of our perspective on the industry. The competition for the end consumer dollar is more significant than ever. Our customers have got to figure out how to invest money to reach those customers with targeted and a multiplicity of different content types delivered through a variety of devices, and need to do that in a way that allows them to make money, to maximize their profitability. Cloud has the potential to do that, and that's what's been the big hype in our industry. And we're seeing good signs of where we're seeing that agility, but it's not where it needs to be. In order for the industry to move forward, the industry has got to make sure that it is defining migration strategies that it is defining, that it is as agile and as flexible as needed, and that it demonstrates the linkages of cash inflows and cash outflows. And then finally, we've got to make sure that if OTT is where things are shifting, that we can help content creators, aggregators, and delivery companies. We need to be able to provide them the visibility to manage the quality, to achieve the expectations of their end consumers. And when we do all those things, we are going to be able to move this industry leaps and bounds. And for us at Telestream, there's never been a more exciting time to be part of it. And for us at Telestream, we're excited about that journey with those customers. Thank you very much. Are we out of time?
No, we have time for questions if anyone.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. The value of vendor partnerships with big users, you touched on it. What did Telestream's involvement with Fox? What did Telestream's involvement with Fox Sports for the Women's World Cup teach you that you can apply downline with other customers? Because that was a sensational job you did.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's kind of you. Should I repeat the question, or is it we're okay?
No, I think we've got questions.
All right. Just want to make sure I'm doing it right. Look, what did we learn? This was absolutely collaboration from our customer came to us ultimately with a problem to solve, and the problem at the highest level was, how are we going to actually? We've got this World Cup coming. It's incredibly complicated and expensive, frankly, to move an entire editing organization over to Russia for 6+ weeks. We would love to figure out how to reduce the cost of that. And one of the things that we're thinking about is, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could actually leave our editors back in Los Angeles and figure out a way to actually move the content seamlessly with as little latency as possible back, so we could do whatever close to real-time editing we needed to do to then publish those live streams. So what we did is we actually sat down with the customer and we crafted out the architecture for what it could look like and what would the different components of that actually ultimately be. And then we started to put together what it would look like. And again, it wasn't just Telestream technology, but it was actually working with others, Aspera and others, to pull together what an architecture would that look like. And then we worked with our customer on terms of how to design and operationalize it to be able to get it done. So, and it worked out beautifully. And in addition to sort of capturing the information, sending it back, back to be edited. We leveraged, for example, our technology in Red Square, so that all of the internet-based after-show interviews and things that were going on were actually done with our technology. Again, leveraging similar approaches in terms of remote editing. What it taught us was the following. Number one is, you've got to work with your customers at a business process level, not at a technology feature functionality level. Lesson number one. Lesson number two is these are investments that we as Telestream knew we needed to make to help the customer define and design the use case application. So being with them all the way through, from concept to execution, was also an important lesson that I think that's critical. And the third critical thing that we did that I thought was important was also understand, once we built it, how can you actually systematize it and replicate it so that it can be deployed? So when you talk about how do you take this to other, how do you take what you've learned to other customers, we literally took the use case in various forms and fashions and have been replicating it and being able to implement it more seamlessly with a broader set of customers. So we got tremendous value in being with the customer so that we could help other customers achieve a similar outcome or objective. Other questions? Sure. Oh, good, because that helps us so I don't have to repeat the question because I probably screw it up.
You gave earlier on, I think it was 4 reasons why cloud take-up was not so fast as people might have expected. And your first one was scared of transitioning, customers being scared of transitioning. And I can see how what you talked about can overcome that scare. But your other 3 reasons, egress charges, security concerns, and the whole Hotel California thing, how did you address those?
So the way we think about it is, so in the Hotel California California example, it's the check-in, check-out. It's giving us the opportunity to process the media where the content is. So what we, for example, built in our Telestream cloud platform is the ability to actually use multiple partners. So if I'm a company and I already, for whatever reason, have put my content, my media content in the AWS cloud, I can process that content in the AWS cloud. I don't have to pull it out. But if I've actually got something that's prem-based, I can use the same orchestration and orchestrate on a prem base. So the issue is not that we're reducing the prem charges. What we are doing is ensuring that we're able to process the media where the media actually is. And that actually then gives the customer the choice as to whether or not they're going to put where they're going to put the content. And we are able to react to that. So we're not forcing the customer to put it someplace where the customer doesn't want it. Other questions? Come on, don't be bashful. I'm an American, I'm very direct. Yeah.
It makes it easy. To what extent do you think you are having to do an education piece on people you're trying to sell to? I mean, we're finding a lot of what we're doing is explaining to people why they should be looking at cloud services, and their businesses are not set up to do it.
Yeah. That's a really, really good question. So I have the benefit of actually having gone through this cloud migration in a previous life. So I cheated, and I knew what the I failed first, and then I figured it out and can apply it at Telestream. So what we did basically was, our customers they don't even know how to start. So and a lot of times they're wondering, if I do this, what's the economic return? So the first thing that we did at Telestream was we built inside of our marketing function a consultative capability where we actually are able to work with our customers to do economic modeling to help them understand different options that they have for cloud or SaaS configuration choices. The second thing is because of, for example, I want to talk specifically about CloudPort, but generically, the customer has to start from where they are, as opposed to trying to, if you can greenfield something, that's great, and those are actually a lot of the deployments we tend to see. But where the real money is how do I take what I've been doing today and make that change? And showing them the path, really, so working with them in a consultative type sales capacity to help them understand what the steps are, define with them the migration path that they would go, which workflows, which components of workflows, make the most sense, what steps should they, what makes sense to leverage in a SaaS model versus leveraging their prem infrastructure. The only way to do this, frankly, is you got to show them that the economic value is there. And then you've got to show them the pathway that gets them to the economic value. And if you don't do those 2 things, you're going to have a very, very hard time. Customers, by the way, everybody loves the concept, and I'll tell you, like when you talk to broadcasters, I can't tell you to talk to the head of network engineering says, the CFO called me up and said I gotta be cloud, I gotta be cloud in 3 years. How the heck am I going to do that? That's literally where these conversations, and does it matter? And you can help them do that, and that's the key.